Good day and welcome to the Patently Strategic Podcast, where we discuss all things at the intersection of business, technology, and patents. This podcast is a monthly discussion among experts in the field of patenting. It is for inventors, founders, and IP professionals alike, established or aspiring. And in this kickoff to our 6th season, we're dealing with abandonment issues. Perhaps not the kind that might first come to mind, but I can assure you that tuning in will save future self a fortune in therapy bills. Patent abandonment is the premature relinquishment of patent rights for an invention. Abandonment can happen voluntarily for various strategic and cost reasons, but can also happen silently and unintentionally. It can happen before the right is even granted in the case of public disclosure, and we've covered this a lot. But it can also happen after the patent has been granted at many key points in its otherwise useful life and window of exclusivity. Like with other property rights, securing your patent isn't the end of the line in maintaining that property right. Like property taxes for land and annual registration for automobiles, patents have deadlines and fees that, if not properly managed, can lead to loss of that right. And in all cases, whether abandoned intentionally or by accident, the invention becomes part of the public domain, and the rights holder's exclusivity window to prevent others from using, making, and selling the invention is terminated short of the otherwise expected 20-year term. Fortunately, with careful management, the problem can be avoided entirely. And for many unintentional cases, if caught quickly enough, there are remedies for reviving your rights. To help unpack all of this and conquer your fears of abandonment, Albert Dew, patent strategist and chief mindfulness counselor at Aurora, leads today's discussion with our all-star patent panel, delving deeply into all things patent abandonment and revival. Along the way, Al and the panel provide a general overview of the utility patent lifecycle to help better frame key points at which abandonment can occur. Discuss the types of abandonment and the statutes governing each. Break down when and how to revive an abandoned patent. And as always, offer countless practical pointers to keep in mind before, during, and after patent prosecution to help avoid what can at best be a costly legal process, and at worst, a complete loss of patent rights. Al is joined today by our always exceptional group of IP experts, including Dr. Ashley Sloat, President and Director of Patent Strategy at Aurora, Dr. David Jackrell, President of Jackrell Consulting, Kristen Hansen, Patent Strategy Specialist at Aurora, Dr. Tiffany Miller, Patent Strategist at Aurora, and Marie Smith, Patent Agent at Brake Hughes Bellarmine, LLP. I mentioned at the top that this is the start of our 6th season, and over the course of the preceding 5, we've covered a ton of ground. If at any point during the conversation the panel uses a term you're less familiar with, or just want to know way more about, I highly recommend you check out our past episodes. In particular, our coverage of public disclosure and the on-sale bar, international filing, software patents, the patent prosecution highway, and our excellent series on continuation practice. I'll be sure to link to all of these in the show notes. And now, without further ado, take it away, Al.
Today we'll be discussing one of the most critical and often one of the items of the U.S. patent process that scares us as patent practitioners the most because of the high stakes and loss of rights to a client and are adding a big expense to the patenting process. Abandonment, of course, and of course, in the unfortunate event that it's needed, revival. We'll go over how and why applications become abandoned, the available remedies for restoring rights, and practical strategies for staying compliant and avoiding costly mistakes. Generally, this is a fairly statutorily and procedurally heavy area, and more details will be in the slides, but I'm going to try to keep this more conversational, so please feel free to chime in with your own stories and anecdotes, obviously. I'll note that we typically encounter 3 forms of abandonment: statutory, caused by failure to respond or act within time limits; express, when the applicant deliberately withdraws an application under 1.138; and procedural, such as missed fees or national stage entry. The rules to abandonment ensure fairness and efficiency in prosecution while preventing applications from indefinitely delaying examination through extended filings. As you'll see, abandonment can occur throughout the patent process. We'll begin with a quick overview of the utility patent lifecycle. Generally, we have no public disclosure. We want no public disclosure to occur before we get to the filing, but it does happen, and we still have a 1-year grace period that applies before filing the application. It could be a provisional, it could be a non-provisional, it could be just jumping straight to PCT or non-provisional. But the provisional then is filed and adds another year of time before PCT or non-provisional filing. And eventually under PCT, a national stage filing is going to occur 30 months after the priority application, which is in this case would be a provisional application. Once this occurs, formal prosecution by the USPTO commences, and then there's a back and forth between the applicant and the office to hopefully result in issuance of a patent. Once issued, maintenance fees start to begin at intervals of 3.5, 7.5, and then 11.5 years. So, and then
one
eventually.
Quick comment on that, not to side the line of the discussion too much, but
Sure.
The U.S. is very nice and lenient with this 1-year grace period after public disclosure, but most other countries around the world are not. So if you want to be able to file your invention and patents around the world, you have to file that provisional before any public disclosure, which includes the on sale bar. Offers for sale are included in that. So it's something to keep in mind, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll get into that even further later.
Nice.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, it's probably worth noting that this is probably a more US centric presentation. A lot of the statutes and stuff that Al goes through are more US centric, but to Dave's point, a lot of the overarching idea of this kind of applies to lots of different countries, right? I mean, other countries have different maintenance fee schedules, but if you fail to pay those in those countries, that can still be a problem. If you fail to reply to things in other countries, it can still be a problem. So the overarching themes are applicable to really any country, but this is, more centric on US statutes and things of that nature.
Exactly. So at each step of the process, pre-filing and post-filing prosecution, will apply a legal overview of abandonment in the U.S. patent practice and review common causes and statutory triggers and discuss revival mechanisms. As always, we'll finish with the practical takeaways that are based on what all these statutes mean to us as practitioners. So basically, abandonment arises primarily during the patenting process under 35 USC 133, but can also occur before we've even filed anything under 102 and 371. The procedural rules are found in 37 CFR 134 and 138, and the U.S. guidance is in MPEP 711 through 71103. Although a lot of these sections often cross-reference to one another. So what happens during pre-filing abandonment? What we consider that is basically applicants may publicly disclose or sell or their products, but then this disclosure may put the pre-filing idea on a deadline. In the US, we happen to have that 1-year grace period, as we were talking about, that the disclosure starts the clock on. In other countries, they don't have the grace period, like David was talking about, and some have even shorter grace periods of 6 months. The problem is that once these quote unquote abandonments occur, there's no way of putting the cat back in the bag, and that disclosure is now fair game as prior art against anything else the applicant wants to file in relation to the disclosed invention. The other big pre-filing issues in the U.S. involve missing national stage entries, that 30-month deadline under 371, and but at least in that case, if it's unintentional, a petition can be filed to recapture this claim of priority. And we kind of go over that throughout. So the main things obviously are to look out for these grace period issues, like printed publication, whether it's in public use or on sale or otherwise available to the public. And then the keeping track of that 30-month deadline for the PCT applications. Post-provisional filing, if no conversion to PCT or non-provisional application occurs within 12 months, the rights to the priority date are lost. However, provisionals are not published by the USPTO, and thus there's at least not a worry of public disclosure from the PTO. Even if the provisional filing deadline's passed, similar to the PCT filing, if it's unintentional, a petition may be made to claim that benefit back, although there's no guarantee the PTO will grant that petition. Difficulty comes when for provisionals specifically, when say like a pro se or inventor is trying to actually provide that or file the application themselves, not a lot of information is published, so there's getting access to information related to that provisional may be difficult, and it's not always on the website without having access to Patent Center. And if there's any sort of issues or any sort of rejection that occurs, then those inventors might have a hard time finding that information and keeping track of it in general. And so in some ways we try to recommend them to use patent practitioners just because of that, right?
Yeah, and I can elaborate on that. We had a client where they had, and this isn't, I can't remember if this is the first time we've had this or not, but I mean, we've had clients who've filed things themselves, not be able to access it, not have, documentation and things like that, which makes it difficult. But we had one particular one where we went to file their PCT a couple weeks out, and they had filed the provisional themselves, had asserted microentity status, never provided the paperwork for microentity status, arguably were not microentity based on household income, and ends up getting an abandonment notice for the provisional that they didn't receive, weren't aware of because they didn't have a customer number and didn't have access to it in Patent Center. So we had to claim priority to an abandoned provisional in the PCT at the same time as trying to revive it. And, and it all worked out just fine. The priority date was recognized and it was revived. We paid an expedited fee to make sure the provisional was, revived more quickly. But it was definitely a less ideal situation. So even if you kind of draft your own thing, working with somebody for that to be under their customer number is a nice to have.
Let's see, moving on. Post-filing, other common causes of abandonment include failure to pay the issue fee, failure to pay maintenance fees, or simply failure to respond to an office action. And 35 USC 133 really sets this out as a 6-month requirement to respond with a few exceptions. And these post-filing abandonments are generally classified as intentional or unintentional abandonments. Intentional abandonments occur when the applicant affirmatively decides not to continue prosecution, usually by filing an express abandonment, such as for a strategic or a financial reason. Often the decision to cease action on an application may also be considered abandonment, even though this is not expressly done. So a lot of times we'll just not do anything or not act based on the client's decision or based on their instructions, right? And that at least gives us some time if they ever want to change their mind, right?
I'm going to just insert a practice tip there. So what I typically do when it's not an express abandonment, but I know the client doesn't want to move forward, is I will call an examiner and tell them, listen, it looks like the client will not be moving forward with this. It is likely going to abandon, so they can plan it. And then I also say something like, it's not set in stone, but I like to give you the most up-to-date thoughts of what the client is thinking. So that way they know, hey, we might pull it back, we might actually respond, but they can kind of plan. Because they get paid for an abandonment, they can plan it in their bye weeks, they can plan it in their timing. It just keeps you on good ground with an examiner should you run into that examiner again or have other cases with that examiner.
And we often do. So I've actually never thought to necessarily call them about it. I don't think they get mad all the time, but I can see they do call us about it sometimes.
Sure.
So that which
we appreciate
when they're getting close. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like, reminder, this is going to go abandoned.
So for unintentional abandonment, on the other hand, these occur when the applicant wanted to continue with the prosecution, but missed the deadline due to oversight or mistake. And a lot of times these qualify for revival under 37 CFR 1137. The key in these cases lies in the applicant's intent at the time of the missed action. The USPTO will often accept a good faith statement that the delay was unintentional, but if anything suggests otherwise, the petition could be denied, right?
I actually won't get into the details of the case, but spoke with someone at the petition office just a couple of weeks ago about this, about a petition to revive an application that was unintentionally abandoned. And they said that it was almost rubber stamped. It was, if you can check all the boxes, that it's less than 2 years, and the entire delay was unintentional, especially if it's like a very short delay between whatever time, with the abandonment and when you're fixing it. They said it's pretty much rubber stamped, and actually the paralegals at the petition office handle those, and they pretty much just get turned around. Yeah.
Give me the money. Give me the money.
I would, yeah, exactly.
Yes,
I would
with a
say
fee.
though, if
Good
your
point.
client, I would say if your client did at some point say in the email like, "Oh, we can't do this. We don't have the money," and you file something, it may get rubber stamped, but in litigation it may come up and they were, that you weren't right. So that's the line is, it's probably rubber stamped, but as practitioners, we always keep copies of when clients make abandonment instructions, and so that it's kind of living somewhere, right? And so if they try to be like, well, actually, it's like, well,
Yes, no doubt. The key is that it really was unintentional, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think there's some interesting reasons to expressly abandon as well, where the statutes themselves mention a couple, avoiding publication, receiving a refund for your search and or excess claim fees, and other abandonments in favor of continuation. The difficult thing, I think, is I'm not quite sure when that abandonment in favor of the continuation would be valuable to you. I think having an allowance might be more worth it for your patent portfolio. But if anyone's got any anecdotes for that, that'd be great. Yeah.
I can answer that question.
Cool.
I had a client who many years ago did a track one, got an allowance, and then realized they did not want the case to publish. They had done a non-pub.
Oh.
They didn't want it to publish. So we didn't expressly abandon, but we abandoned the case by not paying the issue fee and filed a con with the exact same claim set as a time delay. And that was one. And then we got another allowance and they still didn't want it to issue. So we abandoned that, filed another con, didn't pay the fees because that gives you a little bit of time when you get the notice. Didn't take extensions on the notice, did it again, got another allowance, still didn't want it to publish.
Oh my gosh.
So we filed another con, and what I did is I added one single independent claim that was so ridiculously broad, you knew you'd get a first office action.
Gotcha.
That's funny.
And then all you had, then the examiner allowed it, minus that one claim. You responded to the action by canceling that one claim. And I swear it was probably 2 years later, we finally let it go through, be allowed and publish. So where there's a will and money, that's how I put that one. Because think of what all this costs.
Money's the key. Yeah.
Right, they never sort of express abandon, so they didn't really get any refunds back, but they kept filing cons and they kept, not paying issue fees, I guess. But still, you kept filing application
filing
after
fees.
application.
Yeah.
Filing fees. And then, I think that we played a little bit with taking an extension or two here and there to buy more time.
And
It
remember,
was an interesting exercise. Mission accomplished.
And now those of us on here do a lot of small entity and micro. Remember, she's probably
Yeah.
talking about a large entity client.
Yeah.
Huge entity client, if that could be a classification. So they had the money to do this. Because when I thought about this, first they paid for the track one, then they said, oh, we don't want it to publish. And then it was probably came to the world's most expensive patent.
That was valuable.
Yeah.
The only other example I can think of that we've used a couple of times, and this is actually, I think, one of the better use cases for express abandonment, is we've had clients where it comes to a conversion and they're just not ready to fully convert. And and if their US is their primary market or most interesting market, they're less worried about foreign filing rights. We've done a conversion, but then maybe didn't pay fees on that conversion, and then file a CIP because they'll get data within a few months or something, then do a CIP and expressly abandon the con to kind of create that bridge of priority dates. So it's again a little bit more expensive because you do have to pay the con fee because it has to be co-pending. So you do have to pay that con fee. And then you got to pay the CIP fee, but then a part of the express abandonment petition is you can ask for search and examination fees back. And I think you do have to have a deposit account, but I think it puts them back on there. And if you do it timely enough, you can get some of the fees back. And it creates that bridge for them to have a little bit more time to get data and things like that. So that's where we've used it probably a handful of times to help clients kind of create that bridge to getting data, or if they just don't respond to us for weeks and weeks and weeks on end for a conversion, and all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, so yeah.
And you could probably take the first two extensions of time, which are a little cheaper than the next two more.
Yeah.
For sure.
Or three. Once an application becomes abandoned on accident, the key revival path is under 37 CFR 137 under subsection A, related to unintentional delay. An applicant simply provides a statement that the delay was unintentional, files the required missed reply, and pays the required fee. Unintentional delay includes events such as missed docketing, missed responses due to email filtering, changes of address resulting in missed reminders, or during transitions between firms. There's probably a million other anecdotes for that. Anyone have super interesting ones on that one? Or just generally missed deadlines anyway?
I don't have like a story, but what's not coming through in these slides that I think the audience won't appreciate yet. These fees are exorbitant. These are not like mini $200, $300, $400 fees. These are thousands of dollars.
That's exactly what I was gonna get to.
Okay, I'll let you go.
That's okay. So
Thousands.
Where am I? The
Marie, did you have an anecdote before or do you want to go through the fees?
If there's a case with an issue, they usually show up on my desk. But just an kind of word of caution, FYI, I had an allowance where an examiner checked the wrong box on the issue notification and checked a box that the figures had not been accepted. But in previous prosecution in the case, the examiner had accepted the figures. So when I called the examiner said, oh, I checked the wrong box. What I needed to do was make the examiner issue a supplemental notice of allowance with that box unchecked. The examiner never did. So I paid the issue fee and I didn't supply any new figures because the figures had not been accepted according to him, though they had been during prosecution. So the case went abandoned, and I fought that with tech center quality people and supervisors, and because I was so angry. But basically it came down to, the PTO kind of hires, I think they still do, outside contractors to just do these checklists when your case is allowed. And it didn't check the box. The examiner said I needed figures. I didn't file figures, case went abandoned. So, after I paid all the money and almost a year later, the case did issue. But it was a hard learned lesson. The examiner was really not very good. And it was on him to issue that supplemental notice. But bottom line is now, anytime before I pay an issue fee, I just double check all of that. And if there's, all I had to do was file the same exact figures and say they were replacement figures, and everybody would have been happy. So, and it would have saved the client a lot of money in about a year. Well, anyway, just it's all the procedural stuff that can really be daunting at points.
And was that like you're just petitioning the director in that case because it's like a holding abandonment?
You know, to revive it, I went through the same process that you would do if you maybe, I don't know, didn't pay the issue fee. It really was nothing special.
Okay.
The thing that I think bothered me is when I made some phone calls to the office because and pointed out the errors. I had to call the examiner's supervisor to get him to at least put on the record that he had had a telephone conversation with me where he said he had made an error. The record showed there was a discrepancy. And then someone in like the technology center office had actually said to me, don't worry about it. It was right around the holidays. Once the holidays are over, I'll pick it up and we'll get this issued. Then she calls me back in January and says, well, I can't do it because procedurally it doesn't check all the boxes. So that just got me even madder. So, you know, because I kind of said, okay, you know, I made my point and whatever. But yeah, so again, I feel like if you say you're sorry and give the office a couple of $1,000s, they'll give you whatever you want.
Yeah. And on that note, the fee structure right now for that petition, these petitions is $2,100 for the large entities and $1,050 for small. So it's expensive. An interesting thing is that in the past, 1137 was separated into unavoidable and unintentional. But the unavoidable portion was removed in 2013 under the Patent Law Treaties Implementation Act of 2012. And so now delays of greater than 2 years are still petitionable during the patent term. But those unavoidable events were more like related to like force majeure events like hurricanes, fire, and death and sickness of practitioners and stuff like that. And obviously, because everything's coming through email now, it's a lot. You can't just say that the post office didn't send it to you, right?
I do want to make a quick comment on the with the hurricanes. When we had I think Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Milton going on, and there was actually flooding in like 8 feet of flooding in the communities. And some of the inventors that I've heard about weren't able to make deadlines. And the patent office was not responsive to, they were not responsive to the hurricane floods and the devastation at all. And then they said, look, if you're missing a deadline, we're not going to waive anything. So I think certain natural disasters are more responsive to than others. But I thought it was, I thought it was kind of crazy that they wouldn't, give any extensions or anything because from some of the hurricanes.
That's because they want to make money, Tiffany.
Absolutely.
I agree. That's interesting. I feel like there should be like a grace button. I mean, the burden of proof should be high on it, where you're like, okay, the 6-month statutory whatever is gone, but I'm gonna get an extra 2 months grace, with a fee or like a smaller fee than revival. But like you got to prove that your address was in an affected area and that affected area shows up on whatever national database for whatever, what I mean? There should be some way that they could cross-validate that, because that is kind of crappy.
Yeah.
Let's see. So moving on, the next slides are really related to the statutes that set out this 6-month time period for action and the results if they're missed. We can generally assume a 6-month deadline at the latest, assuming obviously taking account for additional costs for extensions of time. But you should basically review all the notices and actions for changes to those deadlines.
Well, and I think actually real quick too, I think you had on the previous slide too, I think something that trips up pro se inventors to those that represent themselves in particular is that they give incomplete replies, right? That's where I've seen it the most, is that they try to reply to something, but it's incomplete. Like they don't respond to every single thing in the office action or the missing parts, whatever it is. And then they, and then they don't realize that even though they replied in the right time frame with an incomplete reply, then when they reply again, they got to pay the extension of time because it was an incomplete reply, and they get this like rabbit hole of wasted time and effort had they just worked with somebody, could have gotten it done without extensions of time and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of that isn't even well known. I mean, I worked with a very prominent litigator who looked at a response of mine one time and said, "But you didn't respond to all of the rejections." And I said, "Well, yes, I did. If you see this boilerplate paragraph here, I responded, I noted all of the rejections, then I responded to the ones I found important. Then I gave a boilerplate, paragraph that said, hey, without blah, 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 and, it was unintentional if this was missed, but I believe I've responded to everything." And she just hadn't ever worked in prosecution in that manner. And so in her head, I should have went through every single claim, every dependent, everything, and responded explicitly. And I'm like, no, in fact, you don't want me to do that. You do not want me to put that on record.
It's funny coming from a litigator too, because it's like they're the ones who are like, don't put all that crap on the record.
Well, and she was looking at it in terms of somebody else's litigation team was going to look at this and question whether it was legit. Okay, so she was coming from a little different angle than her practice, where she would be upholding it and looking for errors. But it was interesting. So she learned something that day, but I did too, because I thought this was really a common knowledge thing. But most inventors maybe wouldn't know that either if they were pro se.
Yeah. Moving on, I guess I wanted to go over so 711 and 701 and 02 particularly note a few special situations where abandonment can occur. We just want to basically with regard to these ones, we want to take note of them and keep them in the back of your head to help prevent them from happening. But I mean, beyond that, they're kind of particular situations anyway. And now we'll move on to how to revive or remedy these issues if they arise. In practice, a revival requires filing a petition to revive, including the missing response or fee that caused abandonment, and then submitting a statement that the delay was unintentional, as well as paying the petition fee for that petition. This filing will result in a decision from the Patent Office. And key practice tip includes filing as soon as you discover the abandonment, because prompt action really helps strengthen your credibility and minimizes questions about the intent, right? If you start doing this a little too slowly, then they start thinking, oh, it could be you're delaying for some time and taking advantage of the system a little bit. Although hitting the deadline is important, another aspect to this is considering what may constitute a correct reply by the PTO to different actions. If this application goes abandoned unintentionally, a reply may not have met all the requirements, as we were just talking about, and understanding the reply requirements of these statutes is necessary to fix this. So, and these reply requirements are really tied in, or really described explicitly further in MPEP 71103.
And to Kristen's earlier point, I think Al showed on the screen that the petition is $2,100 US dollars for, and is that a large entity? Was that the large entity?
Large entity, yeah.
Large
The
entity,
small
yeah.
is 1050, so half that, and then
Yeah, and then but that, like you said, Al, that's still like extensions of time, because if it were a 6-month reply window, you paid 3 months of extension of time plus the petition fee.
yeah.
But I mean, it can easily be a $2,000 with all the fees, plus the actual response.
And if it's for like missing parts or restriction requirements, we we have like 5 months instead of just the
Yeah, I think 5 months
extension
extension
of
of
time.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. And those are the strange ones where like they're not just the 6 months, but they're not. I don't think they're like fully considered an action by the patent office in a way.
They're not, but like for an
Yeah.
appeal, you have 5 months
Yeah,
extension time, so you have a total of 7. I can't think of what else though. That missing part.
that's the
7
missing
months.
parts in the restriction requirement. Yeah,
Oh, a restriction. Oh,
yeah,
I thought that could be. I haven't looked that one up in a while.
yeah. If the PTO made a mistake holding the application as abandoned, kind of similar to the situation where Marie was talking about, then a petition to the director may be made without a reply. So in that case, you don't actually have to file the missing reply or response that was missing, but then you still have to pay the fees. You have to petition the director and provide that information to them. In this case, we're arguing that the PTO made a mistake, so you calling the application abandoned. So we're petitioning the director to have them fix that mistake, right? So for priority claims, petition for unintentional delay or priority claims is under 37 CFR 178 instead, and maybe utilized to fix those abandoned claims to priority rights. So in the case of a provisional, you reference the provisional petition, provide them with a petition fee and a statement that the delay for claiming that benefit was unintentional. So just making sure you keep track of that 12-month deadline can really prevent having to pay that petition fee. So finally, let's turn to some practical ways to avoid abandonment. First, obviously, keeping a good, robust docketing system with some sort of redundancy is super important. Confirming client instructions in writing, especially with regard to abandonment. Verifying fee payments and USPTO confirmations, and then monitoring Patent Center regularly is important. If you discover abandonment, act immediately, verify the reason, prepare the petition, and file a proper response promptly. And then waiting too long can really weaken your argument that the delay was unintentional. So basically, to wrap up, know the statutory deadlines, use your extensions wisely, file revival petitions as soon as they're discovered, maintain written evidence supporting the unintentional delay, and periodic audit might be useful. And I think abandonment can really happen to anyone, but with good systems and prompt action, rights can often be restored. Remember to utilize your resources, such as a practitioner, that might be able to help keep you up to date with all these items and keep track of everything. Any questions and comments?
Yeah, thanks, Al. First, I'll say thanks. It's a great overview of all of this. And you're right, it can happen to anyone. It's like these things are complex, a lot of stuff going on. So for instance, kind of similar to Marie's story, but something we're always watching out for is after a final office action. So let's say you get a final office action, but some claims are allowable. So now you can file an after final response, just taking the allowable content, and it should be no problem. But if the examiner doesn't send that notice of allowance within the 6 months of the final office action, you have to file an RCE. That's on us. That's not on the patent office to hit that deadline. So we, like you said, try to file those early as quickly as possible. And then we usually also call the examiner to let them know that that's there so that they don't miss it. But yeah, it's really so many places where this stuff can come up. You really have to be vigilant.
Yeah, I think we had a situation with another practitioner where he had submitted, to your point, David, after final, but it wasn't, I don't think it was taking a level of subject matter. It might have been like I can't remember what it was, but the examiner just took forever to pick it up. And ended up kind of running up against that 6-month deadline when they should have picked it up and should have issued some notice of appeal, or I can't remember what it was, but it was a little bit different track. It wasn't allowable subject matter, but yes, you really gotta, that's why I think a lot of docking systems, now maintain that 6-month.
Yeah.
number, that date, so that even if you, close out other things because you replied to them, it still has that, and actually keep that 6-month date in case you don't get back the reply that you're thinking that you're going to get. Yeah, because this is tricky.
Yeah, your big rule of thumb on final office action responses now, if you can get that in by the 2-month date, 2 months after you receive the office action, the examiner must reply by the 3-month date. So then you would at least know if it's going to move to allowance. You would know that you don't have to pay the RCE. And then the other piece that I do, if I'm in a situation where I have allowable subject matter and we figured something out in our examination or in our examiner interview. So we have allowable subject matter and I can turn that around and get that in allowable form, but I didn't quite get it right. I can call the examiner and say, okay, call me if you want me to amend this so you can do an examiner amendment to allowance. Because they're happy to take that. If you'll do the work for them, they're happy to take that and move it into an examiner's amendment to allowance. But if it's going to be an RCE and they're going to get credit for that RCE, they're going to force it, and you're still going to have to do a supplemental response. But some are more reasonable than others.
Yeah.
I also wonder if the new view on interview is going to hamper that. Now they really only have to talk to you one time, and so if you talk to them with a non-final, and they, how willing are they going to be to work with you after final if they don't have to talk to you, right? And not that they
Sure.
had to before, but there's been even more pressure for them to, I think, move more quickly. And so it'd be interesting to see how that all plays out.
So when I ask for a final office action interview, I always say, I have an amendment, I have an argument and an amendment that I'm going to present. Like I give them a heads up that I have some way to move this forward and I want to talk about it. And it's rare that I've had them turn it down, but we will see with this new system.
They've been wanting to see my amendments beforehand too, before they even accept or schedule anything for after
Yeah.
finals. So it's interesting. Because I mean, I feel like when you come to them with an amendment, you're kind of hat in hand. You're saying I want to work with you and move forward with the case, but
Yeah.
they don't get credit fully either way.
That's true. That's true. But I feel like I could be somebody's worst nightmare if they kept telling me no to an examiner interview in like a one-on-one rejection situation. I'd be like, seriously? Like we're just gonna wait forever and not move to
Do you want
allowance
to tell them
ever?
about your other story, Kristen, about how you got chewed?
Yeah, I sure can. So I submitted basically it was an interview agenda. That agenda had a independent claim with amendments and like 3 or 4 backup positions that were dependent claims. And in that, and then I put a couple of arguments. And in one of the arguments, it was like, per the recent memo that went out to examiners, basically go back and look at, the MPEP, make sure you're assessing whether this really is abstract, and don't assume because blah, 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 right? It was basically don't call it mental processes when it's clearly not. And I was kind about it. I kind of recited the exact letter, I recited the exact language. I wasn't like, and you screwed up. Well, she got on our interview, and the first thing was like 2.5-minute rant about how practitioners shouldn't be using that memo to tell examiners what to do. There was no question whether it was abstract or not. I didn't misapply it. And she just went on and on and on and on and on. And it was loud and it was gnarly and it was nasty. And she kind of calmed down and I said, okay, well, let me explain why I put that on record, right? And why I wanted to talk about it. I said, first of all, anybody getting a one-on-one right now is going to throw anything at the wall to see what sticks because it is horrible out here. And second of all, it was only there because this memo came out after the office action was provided and before my response. So I thought it was useful to talk about. And I said, I did not realize it was that offensive. It was not telling you that you made an error at all. It was, let's talk about this and how this could be, looked at a little differently. And I said, but thank you for telling me, I will not use this again in the future in this manner. And then I've had other examiners just be like, oh yeah, I saw that memo, you know.
Kristen said she like ripped her a new one for. I'm
Yeah.
like, good for you for not
Well,
like
she was
going down that
frustrated,
path.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure she's getting it from the office and from practitioners, and just she was just like, what the hell?
Well, just like we get it from our clients, and
Yes.
and
Yep.
so we're answering to just different people, basically.
Absolutely. And it turned out to be a really good interview, and she still had, very little thought on what I had put in the agenda moving us forward. She was like, yeah, I don't think so. So I did have to go back to the drawing board. But, it was a good interview after that.
And the hard part is they have to send those amendments to their TQuas or whatever to double
Sure.
check everything, which is a pain in the butt too.
Sure. But I feel like if you're going to reject everybody and their brother who puts software on file under 101, you are going to have to jump through some hoops on your side too. Like, this is not fair for these inventors. This is not, it's not even clearly applied across the board, right? This is something that is hitting people really hard, and people are losing patents. They're losing the ability to get a patent in some areas because examiners are so harsh on, and even some examiners aren't, but their supervisors are, and they're like, there's no way I can get this through. I tried, so it's painful out there.
Yeah, and clearly different art units handle it very differently, which is very strange.
It is. So we'll see. I don't know. Maybe it'll change in the next year, but I have no idea.
Well, the
One
PTAB
other
is
before.
already. Oh, go ahead. Mhm.
Oh no, I don't know. It's been before we break it because it's like a little bit different, but it's on the abandonment area.
Sure, go
Because I've seen this a couple of times with clients is when they have big portfolios that have like many cons, and you're out at that 11.5 year maintenance fee, and they're looking at $8,000 per case. And I've had a few clients, and mostly, people are, trying to save money for one reason or another, and they're looking at, do we really need to pay these maintenance fees? So it's interesting because sometimes we'll do these broadening cons in a family. So you might have a first case issue with narrower claims, and later claims get issued in the same family that are broader. And so there's this discussion I've had a few times. Do you really want to keep all of them, or do you want to just keep the broader ones and let the narrower ones go? And I think it can be okay. It definitely can save you money. The risk there is that, will the broader claims hold up in litigation? Will they hold up in court? And you have the narrower claims as kind of your fallback just in case, and you can assert 5 patents against someone instead of just 3 or whatever. So there's all these things to think about. But once you're at that 12-year mark, more than halfway through the term, and it can get very expensive. So it's an interesting conversation that I've had a few times. Only rarely do people decide to let anything go. There's this whole like, we don't want to make a bad decision, and so you can't undo it so easily, except for everything that Albert said earlier. You can undo sometimes, and if it's unintentional. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation.
So big industry does this all the time, and they actually have large groups committed to assessing full patent portfolios to say, are we going to pay the 8 maintenance fees at 7? Are we going to pay the maintenance fees at 11? Are we going to let these go? And it's a huge decision. These are very strategic companies who filed everything and anything, and they're saying, well, maybe these aren't as worth it, right?
Yeah.
And so in the company I worked with particular, they actually would send requests back to the practitioners and the law firms who prosecuted the cases, and they would be like, make a case for why I should keep this alive. And because these people are the ones who saw the prior art, they probably know why something had to be narrowed and how it applied to the product, right, that they were working on. And if they said, oh, you never implemented this in the product, boom, that case goes away. Get rid of it. Don't pay that maintenance fee because it's not implemented. We don't care. We're not going to uphold it. So it's interesting.
I think the interesting utility of that I've seen is there's one of our clients used to meet with Stryker, and part of his role was finding chunks of Stryker's portfolio that they could license out things that Stryker wasn't doing and make partnerships and agreements for these, little chunks of the portfolio, but also in licensing too. But, I think he was pretty good at finding, like, oh, some small technology company, they could really benefit from Stryker's whatever portfolio on this little niche thing that they're not developing and stuff like that. So I think that is an interesting play if you have the personnel bandwidth, and stuff like that to strike those deals. I mean, that's the whole point of the patent system, right? Not for these big companies just to take anything they want. There really was for that quid pro quo to happen. And yeah.
That's a difficult job. I know who you're talking about, and the person that she's talking about is very naturally intelligent in a lot of fields, in a lot of areas, has a lot of technical knowledge, but also is just very business minded. And when he started, I don't think he had the business development network that he does now to do that job. And so he really was starting from scratch and really was having to do the research. And I think that takes a special kind of person too, to learn how to find companies that would do, partner with you in that way.
And I wonder, like, how you like go at people and mention this, because you're basically saying, like, I have this coverage of the rights that you could use, but or that you could use or you're using, and I need money from you.
Yeah,
It's
he
tough.
does that. He does it to this day for his own company. And he goes to tons of trade shows, tons of conventions, things I would never do. I'm like, that seems like a colossal waste of my time. But he does just tons of it to network, right?
This is retirement, Kristen.
That's true. And
Retirement
he
means you don't have to
retired.
stop working. It doesn't mean you have to stop working. It means that you just get to be more selective about what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Very cool.
Well, thanks, Al. Yeah, this is great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And yeah, so I don't know when it's going to go out, but it'll be on the schedule. So I think actually Josh is working on Wills for this month now, the European one we did several months ago. So
Oh, fun. That'll be a good one for the holiday.
Hopefully there's
he's like, this European history thing is so interesting.
I don't like history, and even I thought it was interesting. So, but it was 10 minutes of straight,
Anywhere
European
time you
history.
can put Napoleon into a sentence, my ears perk up.
Well, this one with all the abandonment and the tombstones is perfect for Halloween, but it's
Yeah.
not going to come
I love
out for
his imagery.
till January probably. So.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's funny.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, that's all for today, folks. Thanks for listening, and remember to check us out at aurorapatents.com for more great podcasts, blogs, and videos covering all things patent strategy. And if you're an agent or attorney and would like to be part of the discussion, or an inventor with a topic you'd like to hear discussed, email us at podcast@aurorapatents.com. Do remember that this podcast does not constitute legal advice, and until next time, keep calm and patent on.